All right. And there we go. How's it going, everyone? Thank you all for coming. This is week 3 for Software Saturdays, which is going to be JSX and Intro to React. So thank you all for coming back if you're here in person or if you're online. I know it's pretty cold outside, so thank you all for making the trek. As a review of our lesson plan, we are going to be spending the next 2-3 weeks talking about React a lot, kind of what we're talking about the whole course. This will be JSX, kind of the introductory foundation of React. Next week will be more about React. And then finally, week 5 will be how do we integrate our nice front end with an actual web service in the back end, like an API, we'll call it. And we'll have 2 project days right after spring break. And then you can be working on your project for completing a certificate if you choose to complete that in the future. That's for somebody else. And yeah, once again, this is on every PowerPoint we have here. But obviously, if you need extra help, there are lots of ways to get it pretty much. You got these sessions for 2 hours. You got review sessions, 1 hour every Wednesday. We have the recordings of these sessions posted on Sundays, typically, if I remember to post them properly. And then if you need some more help, just send a message on Slack. Someone is always going to be online to help you out at that point as well. And these slides are in Bytespace. If you want to follow along at your own pace, feel free to do that. On Bytespace, also our code and a link to install NPM, which you should have already done to my email I've been sending out the past couple of weeks. But if not, we'll give you guys time to work on that in a little bit today. And some more kind of setup stuff, VS Code, text editor, you know the drill already. And then demo on GitHub as well, lesson 3 branch. So yeah, I did mention this in my email on the first week and this week, but if you have not already, please go to the Node.js website and install Node.js and NPM. We'll talk about these more in a few slides from now, but it's really useful to set it up now so that we can actually work through and kind of have it good to go for the first couple of checkpoints. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention as well is if you're in the beginner session here, the live transcription feature should be enabled so you can view what I'm saying, hopefully to reinform, hopefully it works properly. I don't know how about that. But yeah, hope that's useful for you guys. All right, part 1. What is JSX? Yeah, so JSX is fundamentally the basis that we do in React. And all it really is putting JavaScript or HTML within JavaScript. It allows us to kind of create customizable and flexible HTML tags and form as a foundation for React. So if you think about it back to last week when John taught JavaScript, HTML and JavaScript are kind of like separate, but we can use JavaScript to interact with HTML. With JSX, though, what we can just do is embed HTML directly in JavaScript and have React, the framework, automatically make an amazing HTML page for us with very little work done by us. To write JSX, it could not be easier. You literally just write some HTML and store it in a JavaScript variable. So you can see here on the bottom line of some example of how you write a very simple JSX expression. You just say, you know, I recommend to use const. You can use let if you plan to change the value, but to avoid any possible bugs, it is kind of convention to use const for JSX. You just use const, some variable name, some JSX is not required, so we call it here in the course, and then the actual HTML tag. And then of course, please still make sure you end the line with the semicolon, since it is important to making sure the lines are properly run in the proper order in JavaScript. We tend to use const because the HTML tag realistically should not change when we program our website. But if you have a legitimate use case where the JSX variable might change, or where you might want to modify parts of it in the future, then I highly recommend that point you should use let. But other than that, please stick with using const, since that will guarantee that everything works properly and that there aren't any big issues or bugs that could appear in your program. You can also nest JSX together. If you think back to HTML, right? HTML is nothing more really than just JavaScript or tags within tags. And because of that structure, we can do the exact same thing in JSX. So we can just, make nested tags as long as you can guarantee that each tag is opened and then closed within your JavaScript variable. And the one catch here that you can trip you up if you're not careful is that the JavaScript, the overarching JSX variable has to have what's called a wrapping tag. A wrapping tag in this case is really just a single parent tag. So in this example, just the div tag, right? The h1 and the p tag are nested within the div tag. If I didn't have the div tag there, then I will get an error from the React compiler because JavaScript needs a single kind of overarching thing to place, and having two separate tags that are kind of by themselves separated is an error for most JavaScript compilers. You don't have to use div. Div is just the easiest tag because div tags tend to be, they don't have any visual output, they don't have no styling output, they're just kind of invisible grouping tags like we talked about in week 1. And so for that purpose, they're perfect for JSX wrapping. So a little bit about Node, coming back to that first slide from 10 slides ago or so. What is Node and NPM? You might have heard these before, but Node.js is a toolbox of programs and utilities for web app development and JavaScript development in general. Node is developed by the team, or is actually a fork of the JavaScript engine used by Chrome. So it's kind of the same kind of people kind of work on both together, and it allows you to run JavaScript code without a web browser involved, kind of like on like a standalone kind of application here. We like that because it gives us a way to kind of write JavaScript that can run like a normal app, like a C program, like a Python program, without having to write a whole web app for it. And it allows us to kind of do practice developing stuff like React on our own computers. And NPM, which stands for Node Package Manager, allows us to install and run JavaScript libraries and programs like React and React dependencies, and basically is a staple of modern web development. We will always give you guys the required files and commands because they can be confusing, especially if you don't know how to use Node or NPM, a whole lot. But just kind of follow along with our slides and on GitHub, and everything you'll need to get a proper project set up will be available to you guys. So to install and make sure your computer is set up properly, make sure you have Node installed on your computer. If you don't know how to check for that, you can very quickly run the commands node-v and npm-v on your command line terminal. If both of those print out some text, then you are good to go and your computer has both of those programs installed. If you don't, you will have to install npm and Node. There is a link to do that on Brightspace, but you just look up nodejs.org or something like that. It should pop up. And Sam, one of our mentors in the intermediate track, wrote up a very good guide, short link right there, which should kind of walk you through some of the steps for Mac and Windows in case you are unfamiliar with that step. So we're going to go through a whole demo of kind of working this out. But in the future now, if you ever want to create a React app on your own, which maybe sometime you probably will have to actually, well, probably, you will want to follow these kind of steps. First, you're going to open up your command line terminal and then navigate using, CD, if you're familiar with how to do that kind of stuff, to the proper directory that you want it to go into, or, whatever you want to have your project stored within. After you do that, you then type npx space create React app space and then the name of your folder. This is not the name of your app; it is just the name of the folder. After that, you type cd lesson 3 to go into the lesson 3 folder we just made and stuff before, and then type npm start. You only have to type the npx command once to kind of set up the project. Once you do that, all you have to do is go to your command line, cd into it, then type npm start, and then the Node will automatically kick off and give you a development environment so you can run your testing platform on your own computer. If you use VS Code, the actual built-in terminal to VS Code will kind of help you do this automatically. So I highly recommend it if you do indeed use VS Code. Okay, with that in mind, we'll go into demo number 1. So fair warning to anyone online, my computer seems to not like sharing screens and recording on Zoom. So if the Zoom call just kind of crashes, or if the recording stops, if you're watching the recording, we will have John share instead, and we will work around that. So let's give it a try, and we'll see what happens. Kind of follow along in our adventure here today. I'm going to have that screen pulled up. There we go. And this is the thing I wanted to share. Okay, so far it's working pretty well. I will have this as this. I'm going to do this really quick in person. I'm going to have both windows pulled up so you can follow along like that. Perfect. Okay, so if you use VS Code, like I mentioned, for VS Code, you should be able to open up the in terminal here on the bottom. Typically, go to terminal and then new terminal, and I'll kind of give you a command line prompt that you can use for everything else. So to test if you have Node installed, you can just type node-v, and you see I have version 16.14.0 installed. And then npm-v, and that shows that I have npm version 8.3.11, which is perfect for our use case. Now that we have proven that we actually have Node installed, we can go through following the steps on slide 18 to make our new React app. So I already have a folder called lesson 3, so I'll make a new one here, npx create React app, and then some name. We'll call it sample project here. And kind of give it a few minutes. It'll take about a few minutes to download all the packages from the internet and install them and give you a whole bunch of messages and warnings. Ignore all of that. As long as this command runs successfully, your React project is good to go. So this may take up to 5 minutes on your computer. If it does, don't worry, it's pretty normal. It just takes a long time, unfortunately, with, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, with the how internet works, but mine looks to be almost done, which is pretty good. Yeah, there we go. Added. Oh, never mind. Got more to go. Never mind. Yeah, React is a pretty big project, so there's a lot of stuff that's downloaded and installed properly first. Okay, perfect. That was it. Now we can go cd sample project. Of course, replace sample with the name of your project, and then you can type npm starts, and that, oh, there we go, will create your React app. And actually, I think you can't see that, so let me fix my screen sharing there. Okay, there we go. Now you can see. Now you should be able to see my entire screen here. Oh, can you see it there, John?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, you should be able to see a spinning little, atom icons, the React logo, with the name, this text here, and the link to this Learn About React. So once you can make it to that screen, you are good. And please ignore basically all the warnings here, because npm will give you a lot of warnings, and most of them are pretty useless for our use case. So just kind of use them or kind of ignore them, and you should be fine. So, and then if you want to close your development server, just type Control-C, and that will end the development server for your use case. Does anyone have any questions involving building a React app or creating a React project? Okay, and I don't see any, so that's fine. We'll just hop back to. Okay, this kind of annoying. Can't see my window at all. There we go. Perfect. So then demo number 2, I should have stayed there, never mind. Demo number 2 is going to be actually showing you how to reuse JSX with React. So we're just going to share my entire desktop, make it easier for me. All right, perfect. So I'm going to use the lesson 3 here because I already have the code built in. But once you make your React app and you can see all these files in your file explorer or your text editor, the important stuff here is that we don't care about most of these files. For example, these bottom 4 and then the public folder are for React and not for us to kind of look at. So we're going to focus on the SRC or source folder during this class. So you can see there's a whole bunch of files in here. Yours may have more. Just ignore those for now. Kind of focus on the main ones here are app.js and index.js. Index should not really be modified by anybody. It's kind of designed as an entry point to your app, and it is best that you just kind of leave it alone and let the pre-built template be there. Yours might have more stuff in it depending upon how new or old your NPM and your React are, but whatever it is, just let it be. That's a-okay. You should always type up your code in the app.js folder, which is kind of like the entry point to your JSX. So you can see here, we actually have some JSX written down on the demo, some demo example, demo JSX, I can't speak today, written out here. So the first one is this very basically, it's on the slides, basic JSX. As you can see, it's a very simple P tag like you would have in HTML, but located on the actual JavaScript here. There also is what's called nested JSX, which is, right, if you remember, the multiple HTML tags wrapped with a div tag. So you can see we just have from the slide straight up, the hello and then the hi, no problem there. And then lastly, we talk about this directly, but it is useful because it can make things easier to read, is multi-line JSX. Multi-line JSX is really just the same as nested JSX, but on multiple lines. JavaScript will automatically strip those spaces and the new lines away from your code to make sure that your program, won't be modified by putting extra white space in between things. The one caveat here with a multi-line JSX tag is that when you type it, please wrap the tag in parentheses. So if you see, even though the multi-line and nested JSX are the exact same, I have wrapped the multi-line JSX in parentheses. The reason for that is because JavaScript tends to be a little, optimistic and a little bit, gung-ho when putting semicolons where they shouldn't be going. And if you don't have parentheses, JavaScript could interpret this kind of line by itself as the end of a statement and insert a semicolon right there. That would break your JSX and it would no longer compile and you'll have a lot of errors in your code. So to make sure that doesn't happen, you wrap the nested tag, the multi-line JSX tag inside your HTML or inside your parentheses. So to display JSX, we'll talk about this line in a little bit, kind of leave it alone for now. But basically, you don't actually need these div tags there. I'm not sure why those are there. All you have to do are put the JSX name of your variable in kind of curly braces somewhere in the app.js things. So to kind of show that, we can just change multi-line JSX here to basic JSX. And if we cd into less than 3, and then npm, not run start, sorry, run start. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, if you have this error, which is it can't find the React scripts, that is very common if you use our demo code. Reason for that is Node will not by default install all of the required files to make your React work. Because those files are huge, like a gigabyte sometimes in size. To force Node to install those, type npm install, wait for it to install all the required packages, and then type npm start. So we'll give it a few minutes here to kind of go through and download, install a whole bunch of packages. And now we can run npm start. We give it a few seconds and we'll see it opens up in our browser and loads. There we go. And you can see right there is our hello world tag that we had in our basic HTML here. We can actually delete this if you want to see it by itself. And if you see, React will recompile our code and make the tag appear and treat it on the fly for, which might be useful. Yeah, save it too, of course. That's the one caveat there. So if we can, I want to prove this to you guys. The nested tag looks like this, right, with the hello and the hi, but the multi-line tag will look the exact same. Because even though they look different in the code, they are functionally the exact same kind of tag, right? It is a matter of how you look at it and how easy it is to see and read from a programmer's perspective. Okay, with that, are there any questions about demo 1, demo 2 there? I can't actually figure it out. All right, perfect. There we go. All right, I don't happen to see any, so we'll kind of continue forward. So those curly braces, what were those? Well, if we could just write HTML and JavaScript, that would be, pretty boring, not super interesting for us to, work with. So we can instead embed JavaScript variables within JSX, which is kind of super interesting. And that allows the JavaScript to dynamically kind of render HTML on the fly. So in this example here, we have some name, John Smith. And in the JSX, we just put the name in curly braces, and the React compiler will replace the name curly braces with the actual variable value of name. And so you can think of how powerful this is to make components kind of work on the fly pretty much, and have one piece of code be reused elsewhere, which is actually a big part of JSX and React. Really, you can put any complex JavaScript between curly braces, including if-else's if you're careful. And like I mentioned, this allows you to create pages dynamically and on the fly, and reuse components elsewhere in your code. And one thing to be careful about here is HTML attributes. So if you recall attributes from the HTML section of lesson 1, that is stuff like class and ID names, hrefs, sources, stuff like that. And you definitely will want to use them in your code sometimes. But because of how some words in JavaScript are reserved, we have to make them different. For example, the word class is technically reserved in JavaScript, meaning the HTML attribute class for class stuff would be an illegal JavaScript variable or value. Instead, you can just do class capital name. Typically, if you can't think about what the proper way to type it is, just try making it a camel case instead of like what it was before, like class name here, and it'll work out just fine. ID, however, since ID is not a reserved keyword, is unchanged, meaning we just type ID equals in our JSX, and there are going to be no issues at all with anything. So one more thing about JSX is CSS styling. So plain HTML was pretty boring, if you guys remember, from week 1. So how can you make these look much more interesting? To do that, we can either use a CSS file or something called inline styling. To make things look similar to previous lessons, we're going to keep it with a CSS file. And so to use a CSS file, all you have to do is add the CSS file to your source folder in your project, and then type on top of JavaScript, import the file name. You can just change the file name part in angle brackets here to be the name of your CSS file, and React will automatically import the values of your source or your CSS, and automatically re-render the JavaScript JSX tags to match the new CSS components. All right, one more demo about all of that stuff, and then we will hop into first checkpoint. There'll be quite a few checkpoints coming up here today, so hold on, we'll be right there soon. And let me make sure I have. All right. Sure. Perfect. So how do we do variables in JavaScript, right? That's the big question here. To do that, very simple. If you actually saw, we did it already with this whole curly brace JavaScript and JSX thing from the first demo, right? That curly brace is replacing the value of multi-JSX with the actual value of, which is that JSX tag from above. Because you can embed JSX within JSX, it's pretty powerful. But if I want to make it a little bit more interesting, I could say, put a little BR tag here, make it fancy. Oh, you don't need a closing tag there. And we can say, hello, my name is, and I'll say up here, I'll just say const name equals howdy. I can't spell it all today. And now if I save and we check the output again, there we go. On the bottom, you can see my hello, my name is Howdy disappeared because it dynamically changed on the fly. We can actually even go beyond that. We can even say something like, this is kind of more advanced, but you can say if, maybe not if per se, but if 2, I don't know, mod 2, which is going to be 0, equals 0, I want to print hello. Otherwise, print name. And if you can see here, it evaluated the whole expression to give us hello. But if I instead said something like 3 mod 2, which is going to be 1, since 3 divided by 2 is the remainder of 1, we now see it reevaluated that whole expression to now say howdy, because that is false. If you're not familiar with the syntax, this is called a ternary operator. It's a little bit more advanced, but very powerful in JSX, as you can see, because you can evaluate stuff on the fly pretty much. And CSS is even easier. You can see here, we import it and the file right here. So if we change any of the CSS from here, like for example, maybe we change the text align, we'll also say color red. And we look at the code. Actually, I don't think it's going to be there because I don't have anything with the name red. But if we had something like, I have to find I can't remember what things are right now. But believe me, I say that it'll work fine when you do it in your own code. Because I can't seem to remember what the names of the IDs are and classes on an individual file. But you guys get how to use JavaScript in JSX, or embed JavaScript within JSX and CSS. All right, let's hop back. I believe the next thing is the checkpoint. So let's just double check. Yes, there we go. So your checkpoint is to set up a React project and create some JSX elements and embed some JavaScript within them, kind of on your own pace here. There are no specific instructions here. Just kind of have fun and make sure you know how to install NPM. And I'll be here to answer questions if you have any. Okay, we'll move on from a little bit right now. We need some more time. We have second checkpoint coming up, so plenty of time to work on it then. But really, this is kind of the whole point of JSX, is custom JSX. So custom JSX allows us to create a group of tags that we want to use over and over. And we can reuse these tags everywhere in our JavaScript code and basically make very modular, very unique websites with very little of our own actual time and effort. To use it in your HTML or everywhere else in your code, you just call it like a normal variable, like a normal tag. Here's this app in this case here. And you can name whatever you want. Convention is you call it in like a camel case, uppercase case to kind of make it distinguish from normal HTML. But really, most conventions for naming things will work. So to make a custom tag is a bit tricky if you're not too familiar with it, but we'll walk through it in this last demo here, which is you have to make sure that each of your custom tags are in a separate file. We will always give you the basic template for the component. Just copy it, make a unit, and rename and change all like the blank spots I fill in the template to make it work properly for your components. So we'll prove that off in demo number 4 here. Okay, and I will share this. Swap to the laptop. There we go. So within the SRC folder from the project that we have, you'll see a file called component.js. That is the template for the React component, the JSX component. We're going to use these in this class. So we'll just make a copy. We'll just do copy and then paste. And I'll call it, the first rename apparently, demo 4. So wherever you see the word file name, replace that with the name of your component, demo4. And I have one more down here. Ignore the top part for now. We'll talk about that next week. Your job is to work on everything here in between this render function here. So this is what's technically called a class. So if you're familiar with OOP like Java or Python or C++, this is very similar to both of those things, both of those things here. But really, from our perspective, all we care about is this render function here. So let's say const, some basic example here, const some JSX, which we'll call it const custom JSX. And we'll say it's equal to parentheses because it's a multi-line tag. We'll say div h1 big text. Then I'll say h3 small text. And then I'll put a link to nowhere, but we'll have a link say link. And to use it, we have made our fake custom HTML JSX tag. We go back to app. We say import demo4, like that. And then we can just call it like a normal tag. So we'll just say demo4. And now if we look at our React app, and we may have to refresh it, let's find out. Nope, that did not work. Oh, I forgot one key step. I have to return custom. Okay. There we go. You can now see that the JSX we typed now shows up right there in big text, small text, and then link. The really cool part is we can have multiple instances of this. For example, maybe we do some more demo4s. And another one. And with only, oh, I forgot to put a line there. For only one kind of file, we have now copied that same text 3 or 4 times. And that we can reuse this component anywhere we want in our project, not only in that one file where we defined it. We can also make a more complicated layout. This is a pretty basic layout, right? Demo4.js here. But if you want to make like a whole picture frame or like an info card or like a whole navigation menu, you can do that here, import to your other project, and it'll appear, and you won't have to type anything else out yourself. It'll just be there. And that's why JSX is so powerful. Because this is just JSX, we can do stuff like the whole JavaScript variable substitution. So, const name test, test. And we can say, even if I do even fancier, actually we'll call this https://google.com. We can say href like that in quotes, because I think, not quotes, sorry, my bad. And if we go here and click on the link, we can see the link takes us to google.com. So you can actually style components and do everything you want in just this one file, and then import it elsewhere, and it'll automatically work without you having to do any kind of extra copy pasting, or if you make a change here, it'll propagate everywhere else in your code as well with no extra work done by you. So that is why it is actually so powerful, and that's why we use custom JSX. Okay, so checkpoint number 2, but we'll come back to that in a second. So first of all, thank you for coming at all. Your checkpoint number 2 today is going to be just writing some custom JSX tags. Whatever you want to do is up to you. We'll have some more specific deadlines or some more specific guides for you guys next week. Just practice copying the component file, changing all the file names you want to change in there, and creating a reusable component that we can extend next week with some more React and make a pretty cool web app after this.